"You're mine now," said the Apache girl after the cowboy saved her from wild wolves. The sun was beginning to dip behind the distant ridges, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple.
A soft wind rustled through the tall grass of the plains, carrying the faint scent of sage and dry earth. The vast landscape seemed endless, stretching in every direction, broken only by jagged rock formations and the occasional gnarled tree. In the quiet of the late afternoon, the plains seemed peaceful, almost calm. But there was a tension in the air, an invisible feeling that something was not quite right. On one of the winding trails that carved through the rocky canyons, a lone cowboy rode slowly. His horse's hooves clattered against the stones, echoing in the silent canyon. The cowboy was a man of few words, his face weathered by years under the sun and wind. Lines etched across his cheeks told stories of harsh winters and scorching summers, of nights spent under the stars and days spent chasing wild cattle or fleeing danger. His clothes were worn, patched in several places, and his wide-brimmed hat was pulled low over his eyes. He carried a rifle across his lap and a small leather bag slung over his shoulder. He had been traveling alone for several days, moving cautiously through territory he knew could be dangerous, always alert to the slightest movement or sound. The cowboy had long been familiar with the wilderness, understanding the signs that others might overlook, the way the wind shifted, the tracks left by animals in the dust, the calls of birds warning of predators nearby. As he rode, his eyes scanned the ground and the canyon walls, noting everything. Something about this place felt different, though. The usual serenity of the plains seemed overshadowed by a quiet tension. Even the wind felt sharper, carrying with it a sense of urgency that he couldn't quite place. Meanwhile, not far from the trail, a young Apache girl struggled to find her way through the rough terrain. She was no older than 16, her dark hair tied back in a loose braid, her clothes simple but functional. She had been separated from her group during a hunting trip, and panic had begun to creep into her mind. The sun was setting and the temperature was dropping, sending chills up her spine. She could hear the faint rustle of leaves and the distant cries of animals, but her attention was drawn to a more dangerous sound, the low, guttural growls of wolves somewhere nearby. The girl froze, her heart pounding in her chest. She had been taught from a young age to respect nature and its creatures, but also to be cautious and ready to defend herself. She gripped her small knife tightly, though she knew it would do little against a pack of wolves. She crouched behind a boulder, trying to make herself as small and quiet as possible. The howls grew louder, closer, more menacing. Her breath came in short, shallow gasps, as fear mixed with determination. She could not let herself be caught. She could not let herself become prey. Time seemed to stretch. The girl's mind raced with thoughts of her family and her tribe. She remembered the stories her elders had told her, stories of brave hunters who faced dangers and returned home safely, stories that inspired courage and resilience. She tried to calm herself, reminding herself of what she knew about tracking, about moving quietly, about surviving in the wilderness. Yet the wolves were closing in, their shadows flickering in the fading light, their eyes glinting with hunger. Just as the girl considered making a run for it, a sudden sound broke through the tension, a sharp crack of a rifle from the nearby canyon trail. The wolves froze, ears perked, growls stilled for a moment. Then, from the direction of the sound, a figure appeared, a cowboy on horseback, moving quickly, his rifle raised and eyes alert. He fired again, and the wolves yelped, retreating slightly. The girl watched, astonished and relieved. She had never seen a man act so fearlessly, standing against danger with nothing but a rifle and his skill. The cowboy's horse moved with steady precision, navigating the rocky ground as he approached the girl. His face was serious, focused, and there was no hesitation in his actions. When he reached the edge of the clearing, he raised a hand in a gesture meant to calm her. "It's all right," he called, his voice firm but not unkind. "Stay where you are." The girl hesitated, unsure whether to trust this stranger. She had been taught to be wary of outsiders, to protect herself from anyone who might bring harm. But the immediate danger of the wolves left her little choice. Slowly, cautiously, she stepped out from behind the boulder. Ah! Her eyes never left the cowboy, and she kept her knife ready, though she hoped she would not need it. The cowboy lowered his rifle slightly, keeping it ready just in case. He could see the fear in her eyes, the tension in her body, and he understood that she was not used to trusting strangers. "You're safe for now," he said. "They won't bother you anymore." The girl nodded, not speaking, her attention still partly on the shadows where the wolves had disappeared. For a few minutes they stood like that, stranger and stranger, bound by circumstance, the canyon echoing with silence once more. Then the cowboy carefully guided her to a safer spot behind a large rock formation. "We need to move," he said quietly. "The wolves might come back, and it's not safe to stay here until dark." The girl followed, walking cautiously beside him. She noticed how confident he was, how every movement seemed practiced and precise. She wondered what kind of life he had led to survive so well in this harsh land. At the same time, she felt a strange sense of relief. For the first time since being separated from her group, she felt that she might actually survive the night. As they walked, the cowboy asked her simple questions: her name, where she was from, how she came to be alone. She answered in short sentences, her voice quiet but clear. There was no time for long conversations. Survival demanded focus. Yet a bond began to form, fragile but real, built on shared experience and immediate trust. The sun continued to set, and the first stars began to appear in the darkening sky. Shadows lengthened, and the air grew colder. The cowboy led the girl to a small overhang where they could rest safely for a while. He used some dry brush to make a small fire, careful to keep it low and controlled. The flickering flames illuminated their faces, casting long shadows on the canyon walls. The girl watched the fire, feeling both warmth and awe. She had never been this close to a stranger who seemed so fearless, so capable. At the same time, she felt a strange excitement, a thrill that came from surviving danger and realizing she was not alone. She glanced at the cowboy who was tending the fire with steady hands, and for a brief moment, she allowed herself to relax. That night, as the fire crackled and the wind whispered through the canyon, the girl realized that her life had changed in an instant. She had been saved from certain danger, and she had met someone who might become more than just a passing figure in her life. The stars shone brightly above them, silent witnesses to the beginning of a story forged in courage, fear, and the unexpected kindness of a stranger. As she drifted into a light, cautious sleep beside the small fire, she thought of the words she might one day say. But for now, she was simply grateful. The plains were wild and unpredictable, but she was no longer entirely alone. The night had passed slowly, the fire's glow fading into embers as the first light of dawn stretched across the canyon. The air was crisp, filled with the scent of damp earth and wild sage. The cowboy had slept only lightly, keeping one eye on the girl beside him and the other scanning the horizon for any signs of danger. The wolves had not returned, but he knew better than to assume they were gone for good. The wilderness was unpredictable, and survival depended on constant vigilance. The girl awoke to the soft warmth of the sun touching her face. She rubbed her eyes, feeling the stiffness of sleeping on the cold ground, and glanced at the cowboy. He was already awake, sitting near the fire, his hat tilted low over his eyes. His movements were calm and precise, almost automatic, as if he had done this 1,000 times before. She watched him for a moment, noting the careful way he inspected the surroundings, making sure no danger was near. After a few minutes, he looked up and noticed her stirring. "Morning," he said simply, his voice low and steady.
We should keep moving before the wolves get active again.
They hunt at dawn and dusk. The girl nodded, slowly standing and stretching her tired limbs. Her body ached from the night on the hard ground, but she felt stronger than she had the day before. The fear she had carried had not disappeared entirely, but it had lessened. The presence of the cowboy gave her courage. For the first time since being separated from her tribe, she felt a spark of hope. They set off carefully, the cowboy leading, and the girl following close behind. He showed her how to move quietly over loose stones and how to listen for subtle changes in the wind that might indicate the presence of predators. Every now and then he would pause to point out tracks in the dirt or broken twigs, teaching her to read the signs of the wilderness. She listened intently, absorbing everything he said. Though she had grown up in the wild, there was much she could learn from this stranger who seemed so at ease in danger. As they walked, the cowboy kept glancing at the canyon walls, noting shadows and small movements. The girl noticed his alertness and realized how much she relied on his experience. When she tried to ask questions, he answered carefully, giving her only the information she needed for safety. "Don't ask too many questions," he said once with a small grin, "or you might miss something important." She laughed quietly, the sound light and freeing, and felt a sense of camaraderie beginning to form. The terrain grew rougher as they climbed higher into the canyon. Rocks jutted out at sharp angles, and the trail became narrow, forcing them to move in single file. At one point, the girl lost her footing on a loose stone and stumbled, her heart leaping in panic. The cowboy was immediately behind her, grabbing her arm and steadying her with firm, careful hands. "Easy," he said softly. "Take your time. Rushing will only get you hurt." She looked at him, gratitude and trust shining in her eyes. She realized she had come to rely on him, not just for safety, but for guidance and confidence. As the sun rose higher, the canyon opened into a wide valley filled with tall grass and scattered trees. The air was warmer now, and birds began their morning songs, filling the space with light and sound. The girl felt a brief moment of peace. For the first time in hours, maybe days, she allowed herself to relax slightly, letting the tension in her muscles ease. The cowboy noticed, offering her a small nod, as if acknowledging her small victory over fear. However, the sense of calm did not last long. From the edge of the valley came a low, distant growl, followed by several more. The wolves were near again, drawn by the scent of prey. The girl froze, fear gripping her once more, but the cowboy remained calm. He raised his rifle and signaled for her to stay quiet. "They're circling," he said quietly. "We need to move carefully." "Don't panic." The girl's pulse quickened, but she did as he instructed. Together they moved slowly, keeping low and using the tall grass for cover. Every step was deliberate, every sound measured. The wolves' eyes glinted in the distance, their heads moving in unison as they tracked the pair. It was a dangerous game of patience and skill, one that the cowboy handled with steady precision. He whispered instructions to the girl, guiding her through the safest path across the valley. Finally, after what felt like hours, they reached the edge of a shallow river. The flowing water provided a natural barrier between them and the wolves, who stopped at the bank, growling in frustration. The girl allowed herself a small sigh of relief, kneeling by the water to drink, while the cowboy scanned the surrounding area for any remaining danger. "We're not safe yet," he warned, "but this gives us some time." The river was cold and clear, reflecting the bright sky above. The girl's reflection in the water was a reminder of how vulnerable she had been just hours ago, alone and terrified. Now she felt a strange mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. She looked at the cowboy, who was sharpening his knife with a focused expression, and realized just how much she depended on him. She wanted to speak, to thank him properly, but words seemed inadequate. Instead, she simply nodded, letting her trust show in her eyes. They followed the riverbank cautiously, moving slowly to avoid making noise that might attract the wolves or other predators. Along the way, the cowboy taught the girl how to find edible plants and small streams of water, sharing survival knowledge that would help her even if they became separated again. She listened carefully, impressed by his skills and the way he seemed to understand the land. She began to see him not just as a protector, but as a teacher, someone who could guide her through the dangers of the wilderness. As the day wore on, they spotted signs of human activity in the distance, a small trail, footprints in the soft mud, perhaps left by hunters or travelers passing through the area. The cowboy's eyes narrowed as he studied the tracks. "Could be friendly," he said cautiously, "or it could be trouble. Either way, we need to stay alert." The girl felt a thrill of excitement and anxiety. She had survived wolves, rivers, and cliffs, but the unknown danger of other humans was different, unpredictable. Despite the tension, there was a growing sense of connection between the two. The girl began to speak more freely, sharing stories of her tribe and the life she had known before getting lost in the wilderness. The cowboy listened without interrupting, occasionally offering a comment or question that encouraged her to keep talking. For the first time, she felt understood by someone outside her family. The conversation eased her fears, giving her a sense of normalcy amid the danger. As evening approached, they found a small grove of trees near the river suitable for resting. The cowboy gathered dry branches and built a modest fire, keeping it low and controlled. The girl watched the flames flicker, feeling the warmth against her tired body. The air was cool and shadows stretched long across the ground, but the fire made the space feel safe. She glanced at the cowboy again, noticing the way he worked calmly, methodically, and she felt a growing respect for him. That night, as darkness fell, the sounds of the wilderness surrounded them. Crickets chirped, the river babbled gently, and distant wolves howled, but they no longer seemed like an immediate threat. The cowboy kept watch while the girl rested, and she in turn stayed awake long enough to observe him. She realized that bravery was not the absence of fear, but the ability to face it. And this man embodied that courage. Lying near the fire, she thought about what had brought them together: fear, chance, and the will to survive. She reflected on the strange twist of fate that had placed her in danger, and the even stranger twist that had brought someone to her rescue. She felt a sense of gratitude that went beyond words. For the first time since being separated from her tribe, she believed she might survive this ordeal, and perhaps even form a bond that would last longer than the wilderness around them. The cowboy finally spoke, breaking the silence. "You're a brave one," he said softly. "You've done well today. Most people would have panicked, but you stayed focused." The girl smiled faintly, a mix of pride and embarrassment. "I had a good teacher," she replied, her voice quiet but sincere. That night, as they settled in for sleep under the open sky, the girl realized that the world was dangerous, yes, but it was also full of unexpected allies. The cowboy had shown her that courage, skill, and kindness could appear in the most unlikely forms. She drifted off to sleep, feeling safer than she had since the wolves had first appeared, knowing that together they could face whatever challenges lay ahead. The next morning, the canyon was bathed in a soft golden light as the sun climbed slowly above the ridges. The air was crisp but filled with the promise of a warmer day. The cowboy and the Apache girl packed up their small camp, carefully putting out the fire and gathering their few belongings. Both were quiet at first, focused on moving safely through the wilderness. Each step they took carried them further from danger, yet the uncertainty of the unknown lay heavily around them like an invisible fog. As they moved along the riverbank, the cowboy kept scanning the surroundings, noting every sound and shadow. He had been through many dangerous situations in his life, but there was something different about this journey. It wasn't just about survival. It was about guiding someone else through the dangers he had learned to handle. The girl walked beside him, her hands gripping her small knife for reassurance, but her steps were steadier now. She had learned from him, absorbing lessons about how to move quietly, how to watch for signs of predators, and how to trust her instincts. The girl began to speak more freely as they walked. "We should be near the plains soon," she said cautiously, pointing toward a distant stretch of open land visible between the canyon walls. "My tribe hunts there sometimes. If we can reach it, I might know the way home." The cowboy nodded, keeping his eyes on the horizon. "Good," he said, "but we can't take any risks. The wolves are still nearby, and there may be other dangers too. Keep your eyes open." "How?" The girl glanced at him, noticing the steady confidence in his voice. She felt a strange mix of admiration and curiosity. Who was this man who seemed to know the land so well, who remained calm when danger lurked at every turn, and why had he risked himself to save her? She wanted to ask, but words felt unnecessary in the moment. Action, she realized, spoke louder than questions. As they continued, the terrain grew rougher. They had to navigate over fallen logs, around jagged rocks, and through patches of dense underbrush. The girl's muscles ached, and her feet were sore, but she refused to slow down. She had survived wolves, rivers, and nights alone in the wilderness. She could endure this too. The cowboy noticed her determination and gave her a small, approving nod. "You're tougher than most," he said, his tone quiet but genuine. She smiled faintly, feeling a growing sense of pride. Suddenly, a sharp sound interrupted their steady progress. A twig snapped beneath a heavy paw, and the girl froze, her heart leaping. From the edge of the clearing, a pair of glowing eyes appeared. Another wolf, alone but wary. The cowboy moved quickly, raising his rifle and stepping between the wolf and the girl. "Stay calm," he whispered. "It's just one, but we need to be careful." The wolf growled low in its throat, circling slowly as if deciding whether to attack or retreat. The cowboy's presence seemed to give the girl courage. She watched him closely, noticing the careful way he held the rifle, the way he moved with patience and control. Finally, after several tense moments, the wolf backed away, disappearing into the trees. The girl let out a long breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "Thank you," she whispered, almost too quietly for him to hear. He only nodded, his eyes still scanning the area. Hours passed as they navigated through the wilderness, their trust in each other growing with every step. They shared small conversations along the way, about the animals they saw, the plants they could eat, and the stars that would appear later at night. The girl found herself laughing at small jokes he made, and he smiled quietly when she showed cleverness in spotting hidden trails or edible roots. It was a rare kind of companionship, built not on words or promises, but on shared experiences and survival. By mid-afternoon, the canyon opened into a broad valley, its tall grass waving gently in the wind. The sight gave the girl hope, for she recognized some of the landmarks. "This way," she said, pointing toward a cluster of rocks she remembered from her tribe's hunting trips. The cowboy followed her lead, impressed by her knowledge of the land. "Good memory," he said. "It'll help us get closer to safety." As they moved toward the rocks, A sudden noise startled them. From behind a thicket, a group of men appeared, armed with rifles. They were hunters, judging by their clothes and equipment, but the sight of strangers in the wilderness was still dangerous. The cowboy immediately moved in front of the girl, positioning himself as a shield. His rifle was raised, ready but not yet aimed. "Easy," he whispered to her. "Stay calm and let me handle this." The men stopped at the edge of the clearing, surprised to see a cowboy and a young Apache girl. One of them stepped forward. "Who are you?" he called out. The cowboy lowered his voice, speaking firmly but without aggression. "We're just passing through. We mean no trouble." The girl stayed silent, watching carefully. She had learned that words could be weapons as well as shields, and that sometimes silence was the safest choice. After a tense moment, the men nodded slightly, lowering their rifles. "You best be careful out here," one said. "Wolves, bandits. It's not a safe place for travelers." The cowboy acknowledged them with a brief nod. "Thank you," he replied. "We'll keep moving." As the men disappeared back into the woods, the girl exhaled in relief, grateful for his steady hand and quick thinking. The encounter reminded them both that the wilderness was unpredictable and that danger could come not just from animals, but from humans as well. They continued their journey, more alert than before, their bond strengthened by the shared experience. The girl began to feel a deep respect for the cowboy, not only for his skill and courage, but for his calmness and wisdom in guiding her safely. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, the girl spotted something she hadn't expected: a small, abandoned cabin at the edge of the valley. Its walls were weathered and the roof had several holes, but it offered a temporary place to rest and a chance to prepare for the night. The cowboy approached cautiously, checking the area for signs of danger before signaling for her to follow. They entered together, the girl staying close behind him. Inside, the cabin was empty, dusty, but dry, a safe shelter for the night. The cowboy gathered some old wood from a nearby pile and started a small fire in the cabin's fireplace. The girl watched as he worked, admiring the way he moved with experience and care. Once the fire was burning steadily, he gestured for her to sit. She hesitated but then obeyed, finally feeling a sense of safety that had been absent for days. "You've done well today," he said quietly, sitting across from her. "Most people wouldn't make it this far without getting up or panicking." She looked at him, feeling a mixture of pride and embarrassment. I had to keep going," she replied softly. "I had no choice. I wanted to get home." The cowboy nodded, understanding. Sometimes that's the strongest motivation of all. Night fell, and the cabin became their shelter from the cold. Outside, the wind whispered through the valley, and distant wolves howled in the darkness. But inside, the fire gave warmth and a sense of protection. The girl felt the tension of the day melt slightly, replaced by a feeling of trust and companionship. She realized that the cowboy was more than a stranger who had saved her. He had become someone she could rely on, someone who might even understand her in ways few others could. As they sat together, the girl began to feel a strange mix of gratitude and curiosity. She wanted to know more about him, about his life, his experiences, and why he had risked himself to save her. But she sensed that some things would reveal themselves in time. For now, it was enough to share the silence, the warmth of the fire, and the mutual understanding that had grown between them. Finally, as the fire's glow dimmed and the room grew cooler, they settled down to rest. The girl lay on a small bundle of blankets, feeling safe for the first time since she had been lost. The cowboy kept watch for a while longer, then finally leaned back, exhausted but alert, knowing that tomorrow would bring new challenges. Outside, the night was quiet, but the wilderness was alive, full of sounds and movements that demanded attention. As sleep came, the girl reflected on the day. She had faced wolves, navigated treacherous terrain, and encountered strangers. But she had survived. More importantly, she had survived with the help of someone she had only just met, someone whose courage and skill had saved her life. A sense of hope grew within her, a hope that she might soon be reunited with her tribe and perhaps even forge a bond with a cowboy that went beyond mere survival. Tomorrow, she knew, would bring more challenges. But for now, in the quiet of the cabin, with the fire's warmth and the cowboy nearby, she allowed herself to rest, knowing that together they could face whatever the wilderness had in store. The morning sun barely touched the horizon when the cowboy and the Apache girl stepped out of the cabin. The valley below was bathed in a pale golden light, and the air was crisp with the lingering chill of night. Both of them felt a quiet tension, the kind that comes when you know the day ahead could bring danger. The cowboy scanned the surroundings carefully, noting the subtle movements of the trees and listening for the sounds of the wilderness. The girl followed, alert and cautious, her eyes sharp for any sign of the wolves that had hunted them before, or any other unexpected threats. They followed the river again, hoping it would lead them closer to her tribe. The water sparkled under the sun, but it also reminded them of how unpredictable the wilderness could be. The cowboy moved slowly, carefully choosing each step, while the girl mirrored his movements, learning not just how to survive, but how to anticipate danger. Their steps were quiet, careful, and deliberate. Every small sound, the snapping of a twig, the rustling of leaves, kept their attention focused. As the day progressed, clouds began to gather overhead, dark and heavy, signaling the approach of a storm. The wind picked up, whipping through the grass and rattling the few trees along the riverbank. The girl shivered, not just from the cold, but from a growing sense of unease. She had faced wolves and narrow escapes, but storms were unpredictable, and they offered little chance to hide if danger appeared suddenly. The cowboy noticed her tension and spoke calmly. "We need to find shelter before the storm hits. There might be a cave nearby, or at least a group of trees that will block the wind." She nodded, trusting his judgment, and followed closely as he scanned the rocky cliffs along the river. The clouds grew darker, and the first drops of rain began to fall, cold and sharp against their skin. They quickened their pace, moving through the slippery rocks with care. Suddenly, a flash of movement caught their eyes. Wolves, more than before, emerged from the trees, their eyes glinting in the dim light. The storm had driven them closer to humans, and they were hungry and desperate. The girl froze, but the cowboy stepped in front of her, raising his rifle and speaking in a steady, commanding voice. "Don't move. Stay behind me." The wolves circled, growling low, showing their teeth. The girl's heart pounded in her chest, and her breath came fast, but she forced herself to remain still, trusting the cowboy's skill. He fired his rifle, a sharp crack that echoed through the valley. One wolf yelped and retreated, but others advanced cautiously, testing his resolve. The cowboy's movements were deliberate, his aim steady, each shot careful and precise. The girl watched, realizing how much courage it took to face danger so directly. Hours seemed to pass as they battled the wolves and navigated the treacherous terrain. Rain fell harder, turning the ground slick and muddy. The girl slipped once, and the cowboy caught her arm, steadying her with firm hands. "Easy," he whispered. "Stay calm. Don't let fear control you." She nodded, feeling both relief and gratitude. He was not just her protector, he was her guide, teaching her how to face danger without giving in to panic. Eventually, they reached the base of a cliff where a small cave offered shelter from both the wolves and the storm. The cowboy helped the girl inside first, making sure she was safe before entering himself. The cave was dark but dry, with a small opening that allowed them to see the pouring rain outside. Inside, they were finally able to catch their breath, their bodies exhausted from the struggle but alive, safe for the moment. The girl sank to the ground, shivering and wet, and the cowboy crouched beside her.
"You did well," he said quietly. "Most people would have panicked or frozen."
You stayed calm and followed my lead. She looked at him, a mixture of admiration and emotion in her eyes. I had no choice, she said softly. You saved me. I trust you. The cowboy nodded, understanding the weight of her words. Trust was rare, especially in the wilderness, and it was not given lightly. They huddled together in the cave as the storm raged outside. Lightning flashed, illuminating the rocky walls, and thunder shook the ground. The girl watched the cowboy, noticing the steady way he maintained control despite the chaos around them. She realized that bravery was not the absence of fear, but the ability to act despite it. He had shown her that courage was born from determination and careful skill, not recklessness. As the hours passed, the storm began to subside, leaving a fresh, clean scent in the air. The girl and the cowboy stepped out cautiously, the valley glistening under the soft light of the setting sun. The wolves had retreated, driven away by the storm and their hunger temporarily sated. The girl breathed deeply, feeling the tension ease, but she also knew that the journey was far from over. They still had to find her tribe and navigate the remaining dangers of the wilderness. The cowboy led the way, moving carefully along a narrow ridge that overlooked the valley. The girl followed, her eyes scanning the landscape for familiar signs. She recognized the curve of the river, the shape of certain trees, and the distant rise of a hill that marked the hunting grounds of her tribe. Her heart lifted at the thought that safety was within reach. Yet she remained alert, knowing that the wilderness was unpredictable and that the final challenges might be the most difficult. As they approached the edge of the river, the girl spotted movement, a figure crouched near the water, watching them. She froze, fear mixing with recognition. It was a man from her tribe, one of the hunters, but he seemed tense, unsure of their intentions. The cowboy noticed her hesitation and spoke softly. I'll handle this. Stay behind me. The cowboy stepped forward, raising his hands in a gesture of peace. We mean no harm, he said. She is with me, safe, and we only wish to return her to her people. The man studied them carefully, then relaxed slightly as he recognized the girl. She stepped forward, relief and happiness flooding through her. I'm safe, she said. This man helped me. He saved my life. The hunter nodded, understanding immediately, and the tension melted. The cowboy allowed her to move toward her tribe, but she paused, looking back at him. Thank you, she said softly, her eyes shining. I would not have survived without you. The cowboy smiled faintly, a rare expression breaking through his usual calm. You were brave too, he replied. Don't forget that. As the girl reunited with her people, she realized how much she had grown in the past days. She had faced wolves, storms, and uncertainty, yet she had survived with courage and skill. More importantly, she had learned the value of trust, teamwork, and resilience. The cowboy had taught her lessons that went beyond survival. They were lessons about life, bravery, and human connection. That evening, as the tribe celebrated her return, she thought of the cowboy. Though she was surrounded by her family and friends, her thoughts lingered on the man who had guided her through danger. She felt a connection that went beyond gratitude, a bond forged in shared struggle and respect. She knew that their story was not finished, that the wilderness had brought them together for a reason, and that their paths might cross again. The cowboy, meanwhile, watched from a distance, satisfied that the girl was safe. He had faced danger, risked his life, and seen courage in someone else. He knew that their journey had changed both of them, leaving a mark that would remain long after the wilderness was behind them. As he rode into the fading light of the day, he carried with him the memory of her courage, the lessons they had shared, and the quiet bond that had grown between them in the heart of danger. The morning after the storm, the valley was calm and bright, with the sunlight glinting off the wet leaves and sparkling water. The air smelled fresh and earthy, carrying the scent of rain-soaked grass and wild flowers. The Apache girl woke early, feeling the warmth of the sun on her face. She stretched her arms and looked around at her tribe, relieved and comforted to be back among her family and friends. The danger of the wilderness had passed, yet she could not stop thinking about the cowboy who had guided her through it all. Her tribe moved quietly along the river, tending to daily chores and checking the traps and fields. The girl followed their routines but kept stealing glances toward the distant canyon trails. Somewhere out there, she knew, was the cowboy who had risked his life for her. She thought about his steady hands, his calm voice, and the quiet bravery that had carried them both through countless dangers. He had taught her how to stay calm in the face of fear, how to trust her instincts, and how to survive when everything seemed against her. The girl's family noticed the change in her demeanor. She walked taller, her eyes brighter, her voice steadier. They asked about her journey, and she recounted what she could, how she had been separated, how she had faced wolves, and how the cowboy had saved her. Her people listened in awe, nodding at her bravery and at the courage of the man who had helped her. Even the elders, who had seen much in their years, were impressed by the story of survival and trust. Though she was safe now, the girl felt a pull toward the canyon. She wanted to see him again, to thank him properly. She remembered how he had guided her through the wilderness, how he had fought off the wolves, and how he had shared his knowledge and skills so she could survive. That bond, formed under the pressure of life and death, was not easily forgotten. She knew it was unusual, but somehow she felt a deep connection to this man who had become her protector and teacher in such a short time. The cowboy, meanwhile, rode slowly through the plains, his horse moving steadily along the trails he knew so well. He had left the girl safely in the care of her tribe, but he could not shake the memory of her courage and resilience. He thought about how she had followed his instructions so carefully, how she had faced danger without giving in to panic, and how her spirit had remained unbroken despite the terrifying circumstances. He respected her deeply, more than he had expected to respect anyone he had met in a long time. As he rode, he remembered the moments they had shared, the long hours walking through the valley, the tense encounters with wolves, the storm that had forced them into the cave, and the quiet moments by the fire. Each memory brought a mix of pride and quiet admiration for the girl who had faced so much and yet never lost hope. He realized that their journey had changed him too, reminding him of the value of connection and trust, and of the courage that can be found in unexpected places. Back at the tribe's camp, the girl spent the day helping her family repair damage from the storm. She moved among her people with a sense of purpose and confidence, yet her thoughts kept returning to the cowboy. She remembered the way he had spoken to her calmly during danger, the way he had guided her through rough terrain, and the way he had risked himself to ensure she survived. It was a strange feeling, a mix of gratitude, respect, and something more, but she knew it was real and important. That evening, she approached the edge of the valley where the canyon trails began. She hoped to catch a glimpse of him, to see if he had returned to the area or if he might appear one last time. The sky was painted with shades of orange and purple as the sun set, casting long shadows across the valley. Her heart raced as she scanned the trails, searching for any sign of movement. And then, in the distance, she saw him. Bah! The cowboy was riding slowly along the trail, his hat tilted low and his posture relaxed, yet alert. She ran toward him, calling his name softly at first, then louder as he approached. He stopped and looked up, a small smile breaking across his face as he recognized her. "You're safe," he said, his voice calm and steady. "I see your tribe has welcomed you back." She nodded, her eyes shining with gratitude and emotion. "Thanks to you," she said softly. "I would not have survived without you." He dismounted his horse and walked toward her, careful and deliberate.
"You were brave too," he said. "I only helped you because you never gave up."
"You kept your head and trusted yourself." She smiled, feeling warmth spread through her chest. "I trusted you," she replied simply, "and I'm glad I did." For a long moment, they stood together in the fading light, the canyon stretching wide around them, silent witnesses to the journey they had shared. There was no rush, no urgency, just the quiet understanding between two people who had faced danger side by side and come through stronger for it. The girl realized that their bond was unique, forged in the fire of survival, trust, and shared experience. It was a connection she would carry with her forever. Finally, she spoke again, her voice quiet but firm. "Will you come visit me? Or will we meet again?" The cowboy considered her words carefully, then nodded. "I'll find a way," he said. "The wilderness brought us together once. Perhaps it will do so again." The girl felt a sense of hope and relief wash over her. Their journey had not only saved her life, but had created a promise, a quiet understanding that they would remain connected, no matter the distance. That night, the girl returned to her tribe, her heart lighter than it had been for days. She shared her experiences, spoke of the cowboy, and recounted their journey in vivid detail. Her people listened with admiration, understanding that she had grown stronger, wiser, and more confident through the ordeal. The girl herself felt a sense of peace and accomplishment. She had survived, she had learned, and she had discovered a bond that transcended fear and danger. The cowboy rode on through the plains, knowing that his work here was done, but that his life had been changed as well. He had met someone who had shown him courage in a new way, someone who had trusted him and learned from him, and someone whose presence had left a lasting impression. He carried the memory of her spirit, her determination, and her gratitude as he continued on his journey, knowing that their paths might cross again, and that if they did, the bond they had formed would remain unbroken. Days turned into weeks, and the girl resumed life with her tribe. Yet she often thought of him, remembering the quiet moments by the fire, the tense encounters with wolves, and the storm that had tested them both. She shared the lessons she had learned with her friends and family about bravery, trust, and the power of staying calm under pressure. But above all, she remembered the man who had saved her life and the connection they had formed in the heart of the wilderness. And somewhere along the canyon trails, the cowboy rode on, thinking of her as well. Their journey together had ended, but the memories, lessons, and bond they shared were enduring. They had faced fear, danger, and uncertainty, and they had emerged stronger and more aware of the value of trust and courage. The wilderness had tested them both, and in the process it had given them something rare, a lasting connection forged in survival, respect, and shared experience. The story closed quietly, not with grand gestures, but with the knowledge that two lives had been forever changed. The girl had returned to safety, her family and tribe intact, carrying with her the courage and skills she had learned.